The cold didn't hit me like a slap, it took my breath like a thief. Arctic air is its own species of predator, thin, clean, and merciless. Within seconds, it found the cracks in my government-issued jacket and crawled inside like it belonged there. My nostrils froze shut. My lungs burned with every inhale. I stood on the tarmac, duffel bag in one hand, watching my breath turn to fog. The horizon looked carved out of steel, sky and ice the same shade of lifeless gray. That was my first minute at Outpost 37. The first moment I realized I'd made a mistake. "Move it, private," someone shouted behind me. 18 and proud of the uniform, I shuffled forward with the others, boots crunching over packed snow. Indiana felt a lifetime away. I'd signed up to escape that flat horizon, to see the world. The recruiter had left out that parts of the world don't bother with sunlight for half the year. Ahead, the compound huddled behind razor wire fencing like a guilty secret. Prefab buildings painted the same dull gray as the sky, all edges and exhaust vents. Nothing here wanted to be seen. Red warning signs lined the perimeter. Restricted area. Deadly force authorized. Standard military decor, but somehow more believable this far north. A clipboard waited for me at the bottom of the stairs. The man holding it had a face wind-burned raw. Name? Williamson. Chase. My teeth already chattered through the vowels. He checked a box. Building C for processing. Follow the line. No one spoke as we crossed the yard. The only sounds were the wind and the distant moan of something metal shifting in the cold. Even the sky sounded heavy. Inside Building C, the door shut with a hydraulic hiss and cut off the outside world. The silence that followed felt wrong, too complete, like stepping into a vacuum. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the color of old bone. The air smelled faintly of ozone and diesel. Form up! We fell into rows, clutching our gear, the concrete floor sweating frost beneath our boots. My breath fogged in front of me as the side door opened and a man entered. A sergeant by the uniform, but not like any I'd met in basic. Sergeant McLaughlin. He wasn't tall enough to cast the kind of shadow that made a room go silent, but the silence happened anyway. He moved with the control of someone rehearsing every motion seconds in advance. His eyes flicked over us, reading more than faces, maybe reading thoughts. A thin scar crossed his left cheek, white as glacier ice. "Welcome to Outpost 37. His voice was low, steady, measured, no bark, no bluster. That somehow made it worse. "This facility operates under Special Directive 255. Everything you see, hear, or imagine here is classified. You do not discuss it with anyone outside your chain of command. Not your families, not your bunkmates, not the polar bears. Understood?" A few nervous laughs. He didn't smile. "You're here to maintain security, follow orders, and keep your eyes open." He paused. "And sometimes keep them closed." The room seemed to contract. McLaughlin continued. "If you hear anything strange during the night shift, ignore it. Maintenance works at odd hours. Pipes make noise. That's all you need to know." Then he left, door shutting behind him with a metallic finality that sounded too much like a vault. The guy next to me exhaled. "Friendly place." I didn't answer. My gut was already twisted tight. The air here didn't just carry cold, it carried tension, like static waiting for the wrong movement to spark it. That night, I couldn't sleep. The bunk was narrow, the walls thin, and through them came noises that didn't match any pipe I'd ever heard. Slow, rhythmic, deliberate, like something dragging a chain across concrete. Every time I started to drift off, the sound changed pitch as if listening back. By morning, I decided it had to be machinery. It was easier to believe that. We assembled outside Building C at 700 hours sharp. The sky hadn't changed. The sun was still an idea. McLaughlin appeared right on time, another officer at his shoulder. They spoke quietly, glancing toward a large structure in the center of the compound. For a second, I saw something human in McLaughlin's eyes. Worry, before he buried it. Today, we begin orientation. Layout, protocols, chain of command. Hours of maps, codes, and restrictions followed. Never travel alone. Never enter a restricted section without clearance. Always follow the colored floor lines. Every rule sounded practical until you noticed the fear underneath it. Lunch was gray stew and colder coffee in a mess hall bolted to the floor like it expected turbulence. I sat with 3 other newcomers, Morse, Curtis, and Ellis. We tried to pretend it was normal. "So what's the real story?" Ellis asked, eyes darting around the room. "This isn't just weather research. Why would they lie?" Morse said. "It's a weather station," Curtis snorted. "Then why the machine guns at the gate?" Nobody answered. I stared at the tray, at the steam rising from food that didn't taste like anything. Whatever this place was, it wasn't for studying clouds. After lunch, McLaughlin reappeared. Tour time. Stay close. Respect the signs. Some areas are off limits even to me." He wasn't joking. We passed armed guards who watched us like we were the threat. Each door required a badge and a code. Inside, the main building looked nothing like the barracks. Bright corridors, polished floors, real heat. Scientists in lab coats moved quickly, avoiding eye contact. "Upper levels," McLaughlin said, "meteorological, geological, biological divisions. Everything we need to monitor the Arctic environment." It sounded rehearsed, the kind of line you memorize because someone told you to. Then we took an elevator down. The hum of the facility faded as we descended. When the doors opened, the air was colder again, metallic and damp. The light dimmed to a sterile amber. "These lower levels contain maintenance tunnels connecting the buildings," he said, but his voice had changed. Higher, tighter. We walked single file. Our footsteps echoed, swallowed by the tunnels. The walls dripped condensation. The smell shifted from chemical to something older. Iron, salt, and the faint sweetness of decay. That's when I heard it. A hollow bang somewhere ahead, rhythmic at first, then irregular. McLaughlin froze mid-step, head tilted. "Pipes," he said finally, hand brushing the sidearm at his hip. Nobody believed him, but nobody wanted to test him either. We moved on until the tunnel opened into a junction lit by flickering fluorescence. Hazard stripes circled a side corridor sealed by a steel door. The air trembled faintly, as if something on the other side was breathing through the metal. Then came another sound, higher now, thin and strained, a whine that almost shaped itself into words. Ellis whispered, "That's not pipes." McLaughlin's jaw flexed. "It's equipment." The whine turned into a series of choked bursts, like someone trying to scream through water. The sergeant's voice dropped to a command I felt more than heard. "Everyone back, now." We didn't argue. We turned toward the stairwell, boots pounding the concrete, the air behind us vibrating with the sound of something waking up. Halfway up the steps, gunfire cracked. 3 shots. Concrete swallowed the echoes. When McLaughlin caught up, his face was bloodless, eyes wide but steady. He sealed the door, entered a code that made the locks grind into place. "Mechanical malfunction," he said evenly. "That's what you heard. That's what you write in your report. Nothing else." No one disagreed, because the fear in his voice told us the truth we couldn't put on paper. That night, the pipes were quiet, too quiet, and I lay awake wondering what the hell was trying to speak through the walls of Outpost 37. By the end of that first week, we knew how to walk the tunnels without speaking. Sound carried too easily down there. A dropped tool or cough could echo for 30 seconds before dying out. We learned to step lightly, breathe quietly, and not ask what the stains on the walls were. McLaughlin never explained what we were really doing. Every morning he'd meet us outside Building C, me, Morse, Curtis, and Ellis, and we'd descend again. He'd repeat the same phrase each time, like a ritual. "Stay alert." Alert for what? He never said. The tunnels stretched for miles beneath the snow, a concrete spiderweb connecting the outpost's heart to places we weren't cleared to know existed. Pipes lined the ceilings, always dripping. The air had that metallic tang, cold and damp enough that frost grew like mold across the walls. Sometimes the lights flickered and the shadows changed shape before the bulbs steadied again. Ellis was the talker of the group. On our 3rd day underground, he finally broke the silence. "Sir, what exactly are we looking for?" McLaughlin didn't slow down. "Structural integrity, security vulnerabilities." "Right," Curtis muttered. 5 armed guards to check for cracks. "Makes sense." I shot him a look, warning him off. But he wasn't wrong. Nothing about this felt like maintenance work. As the days passed, I started noticing things McLaughlin didn't mention. Thick steel doors recessed into the walls every few hundred feet, each one stenciled with strange markings. They weren't English, not Cyrillic either. Curving lines, sharp triangles, some almost looked carved rather than painted. Every time we reached one, McLaughlin would stop, try the handle, shine his light across the markings, and move on without comment. His face never gave anything away, but the way his fingers hovered near his weapon told me enough. After 2 weeks, we'd mapped most of the lower sections. Or at least I thought we had, until one morning McLaughlin led us down a new stairwell I didn't recognize, level B4. The air grew heavy there, like it had weight. Even the beams of our flashlights seemed thinner, eaten by the dark. At a three-way junction, McLaughlin halted. "Wait here," he ordered, then vanished down the left corridor alone. We waited. Minutes stretched. The sound of dripping water became deafening. Ellis shifted from foot to foot. Morse glared at him to stay still. "This is weird, right?" Ellis whispered. "Shut up," Morse hissed. I pretended not to listen, moving a few steps forward to check the shadows. Through a gap in the wall's support beams, I caught sight of McLaughlin 30 yards away. He stood before one of those locked doors, working a ring of keys he wasn't supposed to have. He tried one, then another. None fit. He leaned his head against the door, whispering something I couldn't hear. Then he pocketed the keys and walked back toward us, his face perfectly composed. "Change of plans," he said. "We're moving to Section 22. None of us questioned him, but my stomach nodded. Whatever was behind those doors, McLaughlin wanted in. The next morning, I made sure to arrive early. Sure enough, he was already there, notebook in hand, scribbling fast. When he heard my boots, he snapped it shut. "You're early, Williamson." "Couldn't sleep, sir." He studied me for a moment. "What do you think we're doing down here?" I played dumb. "Checking for leaks and cracks, sir." His mouth twitched, almost a smile. "That's the official line. Is there another line?" He looked at his watch instead of answering. "The others will be here soon." That was the end of that conversation, but it confirmed what I already knew. We weren't there for maintenance. We were guarding something, or maybe keeping something from getting out. Later that week, he took us to another locked door, larger than the rest, the markings carved deeper. For the first time, McLaughlin reached out and traced them with his fingers, murmuring under his breath. "Sergeant?" Morse asked. McLaughlin blinked, like he'd forgotten we existed. "Fine," he said quickly. "Let's move." He wasn't fine. The hand holding his flashlight was trembling. We walked on in silence, Blyup, the air thick with unspoken fear. That night in the barracks, Ellis brought it up first. "He's hiding something," he said. "You saw him. He looked scared." "Doesn't matter," Morse cut in. "We follow orders." Curtis stared at the ceiling. "Orders don't mean much if we're the next ones behind those doors." No one laughed. Sleep didn't come easy. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those symbols glowing faintly in the dark like they were waiting to be read. The next morning, McLaughlin looked worse, paler, eyes sunken, uniform rumpled like he'd slept in it. He didn't waste time on small talk. "North quadrant," he said. "Move out." We hadn't been there before. The tunnels narrowed, ceilings low enough that Curtis had to duck. The air smelled like wet iron and oil, with something sour underneath. After half a mile, we reached a massive circular chamber with 6 tunnels branching off. In the center, a raised platform surrounded by drainage grates. "What is this place?" Ellis asked. "Hydraulic junction," McLaughlin said automatically, then checked his watch again. He led us down the far right passage. The slope angled downward, deeper than I thought the base went. We stopped before a door unlike any we'd seen, a vault with a wheel lock. The markings here weren't just stenciled, they were carved into the frame, jagged, deliberate. McLaughlin stood motionless for a long time, flashlight trembling in his hand. "Sir," I said softly. "What's down there?" He exhaled. "Things you don't want to understand." "Try me." He turned toward me then, the beam of his flashlight cutting across his face. "You ever wonder why they build these stations so far from civilization?" I didn't answer. "Because sometimes containment fails." He spun the wheel lock halfway before stopping himself. Whatever he saw or heard beyond that door made him flinch. His knuckles whitened. Then he let go, turned sharply. We're done for today. That was our last patrol for a week. When he returned, he was thinner, eyes bloodshot, movements twitchy. He said we'd resume tunnel duty, but this time his instructions were clearer, almost desperate. He carried the notebook openly now, scribbling after each door we passed. I caught glimpses of what he wrote, those same curling symbols, repeated in patterns. "Sir," I asked once, "what do they mean?" He didn't look up. "They're a warning." "A warning about what?" He shut the notebook. "Just keep moving." And that was when I realized he wasn't trying to decode the symbols. He was trying to remember them, copying them before he forgot. Something in the tunnels was getting to him. And if I was honest, it was getting to all of us. We just didn't know yet how close we were to finding out why. It happened the following week, the night everything started unraveling. The alarms went off at 2:17 hours, an unfamiliar pitch, too high, too urgent. Not a drill tone. Real. Red lights pulsed in the hallway outside our barracks, each flash smearing the walls with blood-colored light. The air carried that sterile chemical smell that only exists when everything's already gone wrong. I was out of bed before I remembered standing up, pulling on boots with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Morse shouted over the noise, "What the hell's going on?" Before anyone could answer, the door slammed open. Sergeant McLaughlin stood there, breathing hard. His right sleeve was soaked through, dark, sticky. "Grab your gear," he ordered. "Now." No one hesitated. When your sergeant bleeds and doesn't notice, you move. The corridor outside was chaos. People running in both directions, scientists in lab coats, MPs with rifles, kitchen staff still in aprons. The alarms blared overhead, accompanied by a deeper vibration that came from the walls themselves. "What happened?" Ellis yelled. "Containment breach," McLaughlin said, checking his sidearm. "Level B4. The words hit me like a kick. B4, the level with the vault door, the symbols. As we moved against the crowd toward the stairwell, I saw the panic in everyone's faces. People weren't following evacuation drills. They were running blind, like animals fleeing a fire. "Shouldn't we be heading out?" Morse asked. McLaughlin didn't stop. "We've got orders to secure the North Quadrant access point." "From who?" I asked. "Colonel Hargrove." He said it too fast, like he'd rehearsed the lie. I noticed no other security teams were heading down with us. Everyone else was moving up. We reached the stairwell. The metal steps vibrated under our boots. I could feel something deep below us, like a heartbeat inside the concrete. When we reached B2, the air was hotter, tinged with the stink of ozone and burning oil. By B3, it was colder again, so cold the moisture in our breath froze midair. "Sir," Morse said as we approached the final landing, "we should verify these orders." "The others," McLaughlin cut him off. "You want to argue chain of command now, Private?" Morse shut his mouth, but I caught the look in his eyes. He didn't believe this was about orders anymore. The B4 access door was twisted off one hinge, bent outward as if something enormous had forced its way up. The steel around the lock was cracked, edges warped inward, melted almost. McLaughlin didn't pause. He stepped through, weapon drawn. We followed because that's what you do when there's nowhere else to go. The tunnel beyond was unrecognizable. Sections of ceiling had collapsed, spilling pipes and cables. The air shimmered with vapor and mist. Our flashlight beams cut through dust and steam, revealing gashes in the concrete, claw marks the size of my forearm. "What the hell could do this?" Ellis whispered. McLaughlin didn't answer. He was reading from his notebook, the flashlight trembling in his other hand. The smell hit next. Rot mixed with antifreeze, something wet and animal underneath it all. We kept moving. The deeper we went, the more wreckage we saw, bodies in half gear, some torn apart, others changed. Skin stretched thin and pale, eyes entirely black. 3 shots echoed from somewhere ahead, not ours. Then came the shrieking. It wasn't human. It wasn't even alive in the way we understood the word. It rose and fell like steam escaping a valve, layered with something that could almost be speech. We froze. McLaughlin's voice was a hiss. "Move." We ran. The noise followed, bouncing down the tunnels. Every light flickered. The air grew colder with each breath until my throat burned. The tunnel widened into a junction. That's where we found Corporal Wilkins, the same man who'd processed our arrival weeks earlier. He was sprawled across the floor, eyes glassy, throat torn open. Not sliced. Torn. Curtis gagged, one hand over his mouth. Ellis backed away, muttering, "No, no, no." McLaughlin stepped over the body without breaking stride. "Sir," I shouted, "we need to call this in." He spun on me, flashlight glaring in my eyes. "To who, Private? You see any working comms? You think anyone topside's coming back down here?" He wasn't wrong. My radio was nothing but static. McLaughlin reloaded his weapon. "He's dead. We're not. Keep moving." We followed him through the maze. More bodies, more symbols painted on the walls, only now they were smeared in something darker than ink. We entered a large chamber, pipes overhead, control panels along the far wall, everything flickering under emergency lights. In the center, someone crouched over a body. Ellis took a step forward. "Tucker?" It was Private Amber Tucker. She'd been stationed here longer than us. Her blonde hair stuck to her face, matted with blood. She turned toward us. Her mouth was wrong, the jaw unhinged wider than any bone should allow. Her eyes were pure black. The shriek that came out of her made my vision blur. "Back!" McLaughlin yelled, firing 3 times. The first 2 rounds staggered her. The third hit her square in the head. She dropped instantly. The echo of the shot rolling down the tunnels like thunder. Silence, then our breathing, then nothing. I couldn't stop staring at her body. She looked almost peaceful now, except for the dark blood pooling around her head. "What was that?" I whispered. McLaughlin's voice was flat. "Containment breach." "That's not an answer." He was already moving to the control panel. "Parasite," he said finally. "Something they pulled from an ice core. It infects the host through contact. Blood, saliva, any fluid. Takes over the nervous system, reanimates the host, makes them spread it." Ellis sank to the floor, hands over his ears. Morse looked like he wanted to hit someone. "They knew?" Morse demanded. "They were experimenting with this? Studying it? Trying to weaponize it? I only learned the details 3 days ago." "You knew," I said quietly. He met my eyes. There was no denial there, just exhaustion. "And I tried to prepare." "For what?" "For this," he said simply, pointing to the carnage around us. "It always happens." We stood in silence. The flickering lights buzzed. Somewhere distant, metal screamed as it bent. McLaughlin checked his watch. "We've got one option left. The main control room, 2 levels up. That's where the failsafe is." "What failsafe?" Ellis asked. "The one that makes sure nothing leaves this facility." The words sat heavy in my chest. Not no one, nothing. We followed him out. Every sound in the tunnels felt amplified. The scrape of our boots, the drip of fluid from the pipes above, the quiet sobs Ellis couldn't stop making. The deeper we went, the clearer it became. Those symbols on the walls weren't random. They formed patterns, sequences. Each intersection, each door, marked with repeating shapes. Containment seals, maybe. I thought of McLaughlin tracing them with his fingers, whispering words none of us understood. They weren't warnings. They were locks, and something had broken them. By the time we reached level B2, the air had changed again. It wasn't just cold anymore, it was moving. A steady pulse of wind, faint and rhythmic, as if the base itself were breathing. The emergency lights swayed in the current, casting shadows that stretched and contracted like lungs. Morse muttered, "This place shouldn't have wind. We're underground." McLaughlin didn't answer. He was leading fast now, every step precise. The deeper we went, the more I realized he was following a mental map none of us had seen. We passed through another door with black markings burned into the frame. The stench behind it was unbearable. Ammonia, rot, and something like burned plastic. The tunnel opened into a control bay lined with shattered monitors and overturned desks. "Failsafe's through there," McLaughlin said, pointing to a blast door half off its rails. He squeezed through first, the rest of us following close behind. Inside, a single panel still flickered dim green. "Containment override. Armed." Ellis read it aloud, voice trembling. "So we just hit the switch?" McLaughlin shook his head. "Failsafe's not an escape plan. It's a burial. What do you mean? I asked, already dreading the answer. He turned, flashlight steady on his own pale face. Charges built into the foundations. If containment fails, this whole complex goes under. Ice collapses, tunnels seal, nothing gets out. Curtis swore under his breath. So we die down here. Better us than the world, McLaughlin said flatly. That was the moment the base shuddered, a deep, rolling vibration that made the floor ripple under our boots. Dust rained from the ceiling. Somewhere distant, metal screamed like something enormous grinding through it. Ellis backed toward the wall, hands shaking. It's moving. You hear that? It's moving. Morse raised his rifle toward the tunnel we came from. Maybe it's the support beams settling. I knew it wasn't. None of us believed that. McLaughlin stepped to the panel, typed a series of commands. Nothing happened. The screen blinked red, remote lock active. Authorization required. He slammed his fist against the console. They disabled it. Manual overrides topside. So we go up, I said. He didn't meet my eyes. Topside's gone. You saw the evacuation. That was when the lights cut out completely. Total blackness. Ellis screamed, high and sharp. I heard boots scuffing, someone fumbling for their flashlight. Mine clicked on after 2 tries, the beam trembling. Everyone check in, McLaughlin barked. Morse here. Curtis. Ellis. Static hissed over the radio, clipped to his vest, drowning his name. Then silence. Ellis? The beam swung toward where he'd been standing. Empty. His rifle lay on the floor, strap still looped like a noose. God damn it, Morse whispered. He was right there. McLaughlin moved fast, scanning the room. Eyes up, stay tight. A sound echoed from the tunnel, wet dragging like something heavy pulled across concrete. Then came the whispering. Not words, not human. A low, liquid murmur that filled every corner of the dark. I felt it inside my skull more than in my ears. A sound you could mistake for your own breath if you listened too long. Then Ellis spoke, but his voice came from the tunnel. He said softly, It's okay now. Morse raised his rifle. Ellis, come out slow. A shape stepped into the edge of the flashlight beam. It wore Ellis's uniform, his same trembling hands, but the skin on his face looked stretched, translucent. His eyes gleamed black and wet, like oil pooled under glass. He smiled too wide. You don't have to fight it. McLaughlin fired, 2 rounds to the chest, 1 to the head. The body fell backward, limbs jerking like a puppet cut from its strings. No one spoke. Then the whispering started again, only louder, closer, layered with words this time. I couldn't make them out, but they crawled through my thoughts like roots seeking warmth. McLaughlin grabbed my shoulder. We're getting to the surface. Now. We ran. The tunnels groaned with each tremor. Pipes burst, spraying cold mist. The emergency lights flickered back to life just enough to strobe the world into pieces. McLaughlin's determined face, Morse's terrified eyes, the slick trails of something black spreading along the walls. Every intersection we passed was marked with those symbols again, some half-melted, some glowing faintly. They weren't just paint, they were reacting. We burst into a vertical shaft lined with ladders and maintenance rails leading up. Above, a square of faint light, an access hatch. Go, McLaughlin shouted. Morse climbed first, then Curtis. I followed, every rung frozen to the touch. The metal bit through my gloves. The sound followed us up the shaft, whispers merging into one drawn-out exhale like the base itself was breathing us out. Halfway up, Curtis screamed. Something yanked him backward. His hands slipped. I reached for him, caught his sleeve. It tore clean off. He fell. The sound that followed didn't belong to any body hitting metal. It was softer. Wet. Like fabric sinking into water. Morse shouted his name until McLaughlin hissed for silence. We climbed the rest in silence, each breath a countdown. The hatch above came into view, rimmed with frost. McLaughlin reached it first, forcing it open with a groan of metal. A gust of freezing air slammed into us, cutting through sweat and panic. We hauled ourselves out into the blizzard. The wind howled so loud it drowned the memory of that whispering, almost. The compound was nearly unrecognizable. Buildings collapsed under snowdrifts, antennas bent, the sky pulsing with green aurora that looked like veins. The generators were dead. Only the tower lights flickered weakly in the storm. Where is everyone? Morse shouted. Evacuated or gone, McLaughlin yelled back. Doesn't matter. We're finishing this. He pointed to the main communications array, half buried, one dish still intact. That's the manual override? I asked. He nodded. We trigger it, this place collapses. Everything below gets sealed under 100 tons of ice. And us, his eyes didn't waver. If we're lucky, quick. Morse looked between us, snow whipping his face. There has to be another way. There isn't, McLaughlin said. I've seen what happens when containment fails. You haven't. He started moving toward the tower. The wind howled, and beneath it came another sound, a deep resonance rising from below the snow. The ground pulsed once, then again, like something enormous stretching after a long sleep. I wanted to tell myself it was tremor activity, but I knew better. Morse whispered, It's coming up. McLaughlin turned to me. When I give the signal, pull the override lever and run. Don't look back. Where will you be? He smiled faintly, the first and only time I'd see it. Buying you 10 seconds. The snow began to boil around us, swirling in unnatural circles. The wind carried voices now, hundreds, overlapping, whispering names that weren't ours. The ice beneath the tower cracked open. McLaughlin drew his sidearm. Now! I ran. The tower loomed above, ladder slick with ice, my gloves slipping with every step. Behind me, gunfire snapped through the storm, each shot a heartbeat closer to silence. When I reached the control box, the lever was frozen solid. I slammed my fist against it until skin tore. It didn't budge. I screamed, kicked it once, twice. Finally it gave, snapping down with a metallic clank. The ground trembled. Somewhere below, a deep roar built, rolling through the ice like thunder underwater. I turned just in time to see the snow explode upward where McLaughlin had been standing. Something black and endless rose from the fracture, a column of writhing shapes, human silhouettes merging into one. They screamed without sound. Then the blast hit. A white flash consumed the world, heat, pressure, light, and for a single moment I felt the ground fold in on itself. The sound stopped. Everything stopped. When I woke, it was morning. The sun hung low and red over a landscape of shattered ice. The outpost was gone, just a flat plain of frost and debris. Morse was beside me, face covered in ash. He was alive. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, he said, You think it's over? I wanted to lie, but the wind that moved across the ice carried something underneath it, a whisper, faint and deliberate. And in that whisper, I swore I heard Ellis's voice say my name. The silence after the blast was worse than the noise. Even when everything had been collapsing, at least there had been sound, proof that something was still alive. Now there was nothing, just the faint hiss of wind dragging itself across a graveyard of ice. Morse and I sat there for what must have been an hour, our breath the only movement in a world turned white. When I finally stood, the pain came all at once, ribs aching, ears ringing, face numb. I pulled McLaughlin's notebook from my jacket. The cover was half burned, but the pages inside had survived. Symbols filled every one. Some of them had changed shape, like the ink had shifted during the explosion. We have to move, I said. Morse nodded, slow and hollow-eyed. Move where? There's nothing left. He was right. The compound was a crater. Buildings flattened, the snow fused to glass in places. The antenna tower had been vaporized. Whatever the failsafe did, it had done its job too well. No trace of life or bodies, just silence. But the air wasn't still. The wind moved in deliberate gusts, pulsing like breath. Every few seconds it shifted direction, almost circling us. I tried to ignore it until the pattern became too clear. 3 beats, pause, 3 again. Ellis used to knock on the bunk rail like that when he couldn't sleep. I shook the thought off. We find the emergency beacon. They have to send recovery. Recovery? Morse laughed bitterly. You think command's coming for us? They buried this place. We're just ghosts already. He might have been right, but sitting still meant freezing to death. So we started walking, north, toward where the airstrip used to be. The snow crust cracked under our boots. Every step sounded like something breaking. By midday, a weak sun pressed through the clouds, staining the sky a sickly orange. We stopped beside a ridge that had once been the perimeter fence. Twisted metal jutted from the snow like ribs. That's when I saw it, a dark shape half buried near the edge of the crater. At first I thought it was debris. Then I saw the hand, frozen solid, fingers black with frostbite. The rest of the body was buried under ice, uniform barely visible, face obscured. I brushed snow away until the name tag appeared, M. McLaughlin. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. His eyes were open, but the irises were pure white, filmed over. The skin around his mouth was cracked, and there was something clenched in his hand. I pried it free, an access card, the metal edges scorched. Etched into it, beneath his name, were the same symbols from the notebook. Morse stood a few feet back. Leave him. I looked up. He saved us. He bought us 10 seconds. We don't even know if he was human at the end. That last sentence hung in the air, because McLaughlin had changed in those final hours, his voice steadier than fear should allow, his eyes reflecting light like glass. Maybe the infection didn't kill instantly. Maybe it whispered. The wind picked up again, swirling snow around us. For a second, it sounded like a voice under the gusts. Low, rhythmic, almost forming words. Morse froze. You heard that? I nodded. Keep moving. We reached what was left of the runway by dusk. The field stretched flat and endless, broken only by the skeletal remains of a hangar. Inside, we found a snowcat overturned on its side, half crushed by debris. Miraculously, its radio unit was intact. While Morse worked on the wiring, I flipped through McLaughlin's notebook again. Most of it was drawings, repeating sigils, diagrams of the tunnels, annotations in cramped handwriting. Near the back, one page stood out, dated 3 days before the breach. Open quote, primary organism shows cognitive mimicry. Sound transmission through air ducts consistent with learned speech. Containment symbols failing under exposure. Personnel reporting auditory hallucinations. Recommend isolation or termination. Close quote. Beneath that, a final line scrawled in shaky letters, open quote, it remembers names, close quote. The wind outside groaned against the hangar walls. Morse swore, shaking the radio. No signal, it's fried. Try again. He hit it, twisted the dial. Static, then faint voices. Too faint to tell if they were human or just echoes. Then the power died altogether. We sat in darkness, the only light from a dim aurora bleeding through the roof holes. The color wasn't green anymore. It was blue, soft and pulsing, like veins beneath skin. Morse whispered, "Tell me you see that." "I see it." The light shifted, pulsing faster. I thought it was aurora movement until the pattern repeated again. 3 pulses, pause, 3 pulses. Ellis's rhythm. I gripped the notebook tighter. The air grew colder by the second. My breath fogged into ribbons that hung suspended instead of drifting. Outside, snowflakes stopped falling. They hovered midair, caught in the same rhythm as the light. Morse backed toward the wall. "That's not weather." The voice came then, soft, close, inside the hangar. "Williamson." I spun, flashlight cutting across rows of shadows. "Nothing." The voice came again, this time from behind us. Morse. It wasn't McLaughlin. It wasn't Ellis. It wasn't anyone I'd ever met. It was all of them at once. The sound crawled inside my head, layering itself with every memory I had of their voices. I dropped to my knees, hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The words weren't entering through sound. They were vibrating through bone. It remembers names. The wind crashed through the open hangar doors, carrying snow and whispers. Morse screamed and fired into the dark. The bullets vanished into the swirling air, each shot muffled like it had been swallowed. When the storm cleared, he was gone. No blood, no prints. Just his rifle on the floor, the barrel warped and frozen in place. I was alone again. The blue light dimmed, replaced by the faint glow of dawn. The storm was gone. The world silent. I walked outside, where the base had stood, a smooth crater spread for miles, ice-fused and glassy. In the center, faint patterns moved beneath the surface, sigils glowing softly, rearranging like thoughts shifting in a dream. The wind circled me once, gentle this time. It carried a whisper, not threatening, almost tender. Containment failed. I looked down at the notebook. The last page had changed. The ink had bled, forming words I hadn't written. Open quote, "You are the new Locke," close quote. And when I exhaled, I saw my breath freeze midair, then drift downward. curling into symbols on the ice, the same ones McLaughlin had traced. I wanted to scream. Instead, I whispered the truth that no one else would ever hear. Outpost 37 isn't gone. It just moved higher, into the air, into the wind, and it's still listening. Every gust that passes through this valley carries pieces of what we unleashed. Names, memories, fragments of orders that were never given. If you ever hear your own name in the wind, don't answer. That's not the wind calling you back. That's the thing beneath it, testing the lock. Because I've learned something since that day. Containment doesn't fail once. It keeps looking for cracks. And it always starts with a name.